Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with the top decks for Modern in July 2023. A little bit of a format shakeup due to Modern Horizons Lite 3.0 question mark. No, a set that a lot of people considered maybe a Commander heavy set has made some waves in the Modern format, and obviously Lord of the Rings. Obviously, the big search for the serialized version of the One Ring is now over, so someone's going to be a millionaire off of playing Magic. Not something that typically happens, but I digress. So, as far as the impact the cards have had on the format, in our top decks of the month, this month, first one, Living End. Living End has kind of undergone a little bit of a genesis. Anytime cheap cyclers, which generally get ignored by most people, are printed, if they fit into the Living End strategy, and the fact that these ones also happen to be in the Teamer colors, Elephant, or whatever they call it, has mountain cycling, allowing you to find, steam vents or breeding pool, or steam vents, or a stomping ground if you happen to have one in your list, etc. And then Generous Ent, forest cycling, so you can find stomping ground, breeding pool, etc. Basic forest. While it doesn't have a huge impact overall on the deck, it does replace some of the other cyclers you would see on the list. You still see a very high concentration of black cards because of Grief. Force of Negation is a little bit worse with the number of blue cards, but I digress. Overall, the land count goes down a little bit, the number of cyclers go up, so the deck gets a little bit better at executing its strategy. Game 1, Game 2, and Game 3 still face a lot of the same problems. However, currently it is one of the most trending upwards decks in the Modern format, hence why we have it at number 1 on our list. Number 2, a deck that's still kind of settling into its new role in the format, and that is 5-color Creativity. Now, this is a deck that has been at the top of the mountain for the last couple months, kind of slid down a little bit this month. It has a couple of new cards, potentially. The first one, obviously, you can play the One Ring in it. I've seen some builds with, someone out, although the vast majority are still playing without. One of the new cards that has popped up is Fixed Remand, question mark. Reprieve, return target spell to its owner's hand, draw a card. Basically remand without the counterspell ability, which is relevant against things like Veil of Summer, etc. Whether this is the best card for this deck to be playing, it certainly does kind of fit the strategy, but it does also stretch the mana a little bit, so when you're playing a 5-color based red deck for Dwarven Mine, things are a little bit of a stretch, but still one of the more powerful decks in the format, and possibly one of the few decks that is capable of keeping up with all of these turbo-powered, the One Ring decks. Another deck still chilling out among the top 5 in the format, and that is Hammer Time. This deck really didn't get a ton of new additions. Forge Anew is an interesting one. It enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, nice way to rebuy if opponent's blown up a hammer or something. As long as your turn, you may activate equip abilities at any time you could an instant. Quite powerful, kind of the Sigarda's Aid-esque effect. But without having to cast it. And then you may pay 0 rather than equip for the first time during your turn, activate during each of your turns, or first equip ability during each of your turns. The only thing holding this back is the fact that it's 3 mana. If this were a 2 mana card, it would probably maybe even replace Sigarda's Aid or just show up in more numbers. It allows you another equip ability, allows you to rebuy equipment that gets blown up, etc. So it's a very nice card, except for it's really high on the mana curve for a deck that's mostly 1 and 2 mana spells, other than Caldera Complete, which is really a 2 mana spell with Stoneforge Mystic. So other people don't have this deck quite as high, but it is still performing quite well. Obviously, you could put other combo decks like Yawgmoth or Amulet Titan in the top 5, but I feel this is the one that's been the most consistent performance throughout the last several months and really hasn't slipped all that much. One of the other decks that's still chugging along is one of the top decks in the format, and that is Merc Tide. Now, Merc Tide and Scam both do a lot of the same things in terms of where they occupy in the format. They're both Blood Moon decks. They're both disruption decks that try to prey on these kind of mid-range-ish control decks, or try to, prey on the early turns, kind of get a snowball effect, win the game with some of their heavy hitters in the late game with things like Merc Tide or Fury. I put Merc Tide over this simply because it's had more numerical results than Scam, although you could argue that Scam has a better overall performance in terms of its conversion rate. But Merc Tide is still a very highly played deck, one of the most highly played decks in the format. For that reason, it's number 4 on our list this month. Doesn't really have any of the new cards, but it's still a deck that performs quite well in the format as is. Finally, this might be a little bit high, and that is Omnath Elementals. Now, this deck has access to 2 new cards. Delighted Halfling is basically a mana dork that turns all your legendary spells can't be counterable, so suddenly your running 6s can't be countered, your Teferis can't be countered, your Omnaths can't be countered, the One Rings can't be countered, your Illushnorns can't be countered. This deck is extremely powerful and is back to its old money pile moniker. The only problem with this deck, and probably why it doesn't show up even more than it does, well, 2-part problem. One, the One Ring is insanely expensive along with a deck that's already pushing over $1,000 or close to 1,000 tickets on Magic Online. And number 2, it still has a terrible creativity matchup. The One Ring might help that. How much, to what degree, I don't know. But this is a deck that would frequently show up. It usually preyed on Merc Tide, had a decent Hammer matchup. As we found this week, it seems to have a fairly decent Amulet Titan matchup. And you have the tools to fight a lot of other decks in the format. One of the main reasons it's kind of slipped down over the last several months was the huge presence of creativity. And now that you have both an accelerant and a huge payoff in addition to the Omnaths, could be possible that this is just a powerful deck waiting to rise. And I could easily see this following a living NS trajectory to the top of the format. But for now, we're putting it number 5, although you could certainly argue for other decks like Rakdos Scam, Yawgmoth, etc. But these are our top 5 decks for the modern format right now. Some decks that have a little bit of have made a little bit of a move because of the shakeup in the format. And the card that really is dominating all the news headlines is the One Ring. Whenever you cast it, ETB, you get protection until the end of turn. Now this is a little bit weird, but you do get protection from your own effects, which can be relevant in some situations. If you follow Aspiring Spike's stream, he found that out the hard way when he went to try to mill himself with a grinding station and realized that he couldn't target himself anymore. But at the beginning of each upkeep, lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. Now there is a little bit of a dance this card can undergo with something like Leyline Binding. That if you tap it and your opponent Leyline Bindings in response, you don't get to draw a card. But, the fact that it is indestructible, the fact that it is a 4-mana artifact and might be one of the most powerful 4-mana plays in the format, possibly surpassing Omnath, things like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Yawgmoth, etc. This might be one of the defining cards of the format for quite some time, unless it proves to be too much of an Oko or an Uro problem, and then, well, Wizards might have to ban the most the Hallstone or the key part of the new set, so we'll wait and see on that one. But this is certainly a card that is shaking up the format, and there's a lot of different decks that have been trying it out. Omnath Elementals, some versions of Creativity, Tron, etc. So, while it doesn't show up in our top 5 much other than this Omnath Elementals list, certainly a card you should be aware of, and certainly a card that might dominate the headlines of the upcoming Pro Tour. Once again, these are our top 5 modern deck list for July 2023. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you for the next video.